As we try to understand what's going on right now in our world, we have to look at the past, history, to help us navigate the present and plan for the future. We've always had plagues, crises, whether you look in the Bible or 100 years ago, when more than 200 million people died. Let's try to understand where we are in this process and what God could be saying to us and what we need to say to each other in this time of crisis. We will try to find reasons why. We will have people, as we should, praying away, praising away, trying to understand where we are, what we did wrong, and what we can do differently. And that's really good. But let's look at some lessons that we can learn from this process. In the middle of tragedy, we don't all have to destroy ourselves, but we can find ways to understand what we're doing and why we're doing what we do. David, when he was at his lowest, cried out to the Lord, but reassured himself by saying, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, because you are with me." Couple things to keep in mind. He wasn't in death, he was death adjacent. And although there's death around us and tragedy and crying all around us, we're not in the middle of it, we're just adjacent to it. And so the other piece is recognizing that God is with us. And I know that for some who especially are experiencing the pain directly may not feel that God is with you, but He is there. He is always there. Let's look at another way to handle this. And that is that we can find opportunities in the middle of the crisis. There was a time in Israel's history when they had fallen into absolute despair. There was famine in the land as predicted by the prophet. The people had devolved not only to eating unclean animals, but had devolved into cannibalism, eating their own children, making pacts to do this, and some, of course, not following through on that. This was enough to cause the king and the people to cry out to God. And on top of that, they were invaded by the Sumerian army. They were run out of their own land because they were not as strong as the army. But there were 4 lepers who couldn't go into the land, couldn't be with their people, because they were unclean. They were ritually unclean. They could not go to the priest. They were alone. And so they started to reason among themselves and said, "Look, buddy, we're going to die anyway. So let's choose the best option of death. If we go into the land, we could be stoned to death because we are lepers. And although everyone's in a bad situation, they could possibly kill us. If we stay here, we will starve to death and we will surely die because there is nothing to eat. But let's think about going to the Syrian army. They have food, there's water, and who knows, they might feed us before killing us. But either way, we are going to die." They agreed to that and decided to take the step of faith. They walked into the camp. And when they got there, they found it unusually empty. There were still animals, food, water, drink, clothing, gold, silver, but no one was there. Well, they did what hungry people did. They ate. They were satisfied. And when no one returned, they took the spoils. They took the gold, the silver, clothing, and hid them for themselves. Went and got some more. Did the same thing. After they had done this, they decided to tell the king, tell the people, although you are dying, there is life somewhere else. Come and take and see what God has provided for us. They were initially ridiculed. They were not believed. But what God had done was incredible. He supernaturally charged their footsteps so that as they were moving toward the army in faith, what the army heard was a bigger army coming to destroy them. And so in fear, they ran away. In fear, they lost everything because God had supercharged the steps of these lepers who were destined for death. And in that process, saved the people of the land. In our most desperate times, we need to exercise faith. The lepers just wanted food, but they ended up with wealth, and they shared what they had. During this time, what opportunities can you find? How can you help yourself and your community? Think about it. There is always an opportunity for our land, for our families, and for ourselves.